All right, we're going to go over the structure of skeletal muscle. So this is going to include most of what you need to know about the structure of skeletal muscle, and it's going to review synapses at a myoneural junction, which you should more or less remember from nervous system. So first of all, we have muscle groupings. There are approximately 640 skeletal muscles in the human body, which you should have seen in the crash course video that you already watched. Almost every muscle is going to constitute one part of a pair of bilateral muscles, meaning that they're found on both sides of a bone or of a joint. And that's going to result in approximately 320 pairs of muscles. Every muscle group is going to have a prime mover, which is the main muscle performing the action, a synergist, which is going to assist the prime mover, and an antagonist, which is going to resist the prime mover's action and cause movement in the opposite direction. You saw in your previous reading that some muscles will also have fixators that'll help stabilize the muscle, but every muscle group is going to have prime mover, synergist, and antagonist. Now, a muscle's role in the group is going to be dependent on the movement. So that's to say which is the prime mover and which is the antagonist is going to change based on the direction. For example, if we're talking about movement of the arm, flexion around the elbow is going to be the bicep as the prime mover, but extension at the elbow is going to be the tricep as the prime mover. Getting into histology a little bit, a skeletal muscle is an organ of the muscular system. It's going to be composed of skeletal muscle tissue, because remember we have three types: skeletal, smooth, and cardiac. But this one's going to be skeletal muscle tissue, nervous tissue, blood, and other connective tissue. Muscles are going to have two ends, an origin and an insertion. The origin is going to be the immovable end of a muscle, or it might also be described as the less movable end of the bone. The insertion is going to be the movable end of the muscle, or attached to the bone that is more movable. For some muscles, it is interchangeable depending on the movement. But for most, there is a pretty definitive origin and pretty definitive insertion. So getting into some diagrams. This is mostly to expose you to some terms and where they fall on the diagram. So getting into levels of organization, our largest level, our most macroscopic level, is the muscle, which is then arranged into fascicles, which are then arranged into muscle fibers. Those are our cells. Then myofibrils, and then thick and thin filaments. When we are talking about the different layers of muscle, we go from a tendon, starting to branch into fascia, which actually cover the muscle. And this is going to branch into our epimysium. Epi, as a root, is going to be the outside. When we get deeper into the muscle, we start to see the perimysium. Peri is going to be our middle layer. Deeper inside, we have endomysium. This is going to be our innermost layer. Now would be a good time to pause this video and watch the tendons and Twizzlers video. The tendons and Twizzlers video is a lab that we would have done in class, but instead, given the circumstances, you get to watch somebody play with some licorice and saran wrap. If you have licorice and saran wrap, by all means, I encourage you to build your own model of a muscle. But in the meantime, what you can do is you can watch his demonstration and then pair the terms he's talking about to the terms on this diagram. However, any terms he mentions that are not on this diagram are not terms that you need to worry about. So within your endomysium, you have your sarcolemma. Each sarcolemma is going to hold your sarcomeres. Within your sarcomere, you have your filaments, your actin and myosin filaments, and then your Z lines, your I bands, your A bands, and your H zones, and your M lines. We're not going to get too far into this today. We'll talk about them more when we start talking about muscle contractions. But this is more so that you have seen these before. They're not foreign words when we start talking about muscle contraction. This diagram should look a little bit familiar because we've talked about neuromuscular junctions before. We talked about them when we talked about nervous system and how an impulse travels. So motor neurons are going to control effectors, like skeletal muscle. So as a reminder, this is a part of your peripheral nervous system. Each skeletal muscle fiber is going to be functionally connected to the axon of a motor neuron. But remember that they're not physically connected. We do have a gap there. That's going to be the synaptic cleft. One motor neuron might connect to multiple muscle fibers. So it kind of looks like one in this diagram, but each of these little fingers is a different muscle fiber. This allows many muscle fibers to contract simultaneously. The motor neuron and the muscle fibers that it controls are collectively called a motor unit. So at this point in time, you are set to go to Teams for your exit ticket link. That is where your link to your Google form is posted as a part of the same post where this video was. If you did not pause the video to watch the tendons and Twizzlers demonstration, take the time to do that before you do the exit ticket because it will help you with the diagram breakdown. Otherwise, you're all set.